It happened on a dark night, when all living beings were dozing, and only the moon illuminated their sleep. However, later not everyone was asleep, as the man asked the girl if she had really offered to sleep in the same bed with whom. Perhaps he had come for her soul. The young man asked the heroine, named Nadia Bayasit, not to be mistaken, and all because the man wanted absolutely nothing to do with Bayasit's daughter. And the girl, in turn, asked Glenn to wait, although he no longer listened to her. It is difficult for a spoiled child to hear such cold words, but for Nadia, it was a great happiness. The heroine was the illegitimate daughter of the Bayasit family, which is why she had a very unhappy life. The girl's stepsister vented all her anger on her because she considered herself superior. Nadia was her father's puppet, whom he used in every way for the good of the family. Moreover, her own fiancé was involved in the poor girl's death. But after that, Nadia opened her eyes again, and it turned out that she had returned to one of the days when she was 20 years old. Since the heroine had a second chance, she decided to destroy everyone who led her to this. And to start, pretending to be madly in love, Nadia decided to marry the Bayasid family's old enemy. And this man, who became the heroine's husband, was the Marquis of Winterfelde the North. Since the girl is the daughter of the Marquis's enemy, he certainly cannot sincerely fall in love with her. Therefore, Nadia was confident that everything would go as she had planned. And then, due to the fact that the heroine walked carelessly, lost in her thoughts, she twisted her ankle and stumbled. Moreover, the girl was very worried about the fact that she and the man were too close. The protagonist's plan was not entirely thought out, because her fiancé became interested in her. The long-lasting great war between the kingdom and the demons, thanks to a hero. It ended with the victory of the kingdom, so everyone was very happy. The people acclaimed the savior who ended the war, and his name was Lee Jai-ho. But there is a more beautiful description for the hero, because he was called a warrior from another world. In Dragon Hunter, Lee Jai-ho was also the fiancé of an abandoned woman from the Bayasit duchy. Lady Nadia. The marriage of the heroes was concluded even before the warrior became a hero, and so began the whole tragedy. The main character was the daughter of a concubine of the Bayazid family, and therefore, the others did not consider her equal. The girl never dreamed that her own father would acknowledge her, because she was constantly compared to her younger sister, who had been spoiled since childhood. Even the servants disdained Nadia, so Nadia supported the lady. But suddenly, the girl had a chance to earn her father's respect, and it was through marriage with Lee Jai-ho. At that time, the man was a mercenary who was called from another world to protect the kingdom. Duke Balazit was sure that if he tied the young man to his daughter, it would definitely benefit him. So, Lee Jai-ho entered into a fictitious marriage with Nadia, and the newlyweds became Bayazit's pawns. Although the heroes were forced to marry, the girl still had hope that someday they could live as a husband and a normal woman. But the main character thought so only until she fell into a trap. Nadia tried to explain that there was just some misunderstanding and asked to call Lee Jai-ho. The man who closed the door on the lady said that she still did not understand the situation she was in. And all because Lord Lee Jai-ho will never return to his wife now. Since the man has become an important person in the country, Nadia cannot be his wife. It turned out that all these words were spoken by the main character's half-sister, Karen Balasit. Therefore, Karen did not understand what kind of mistake there could be if everything was clear. But the girl still could not believe that her husband was involved in this. It seemed as if all this had been arranged solely by the heroine's father and her sister. Nadia thought that all this happened because of her enmity with her stepsister. In fact, the hero was also involved in what happened, because together with the Bayazid family, he decided how to make their marriage never have happened. As a result, they decided to give Nadia alcohol at the banquet, and then put a hired man next to her. When the whole plan ended successfully, all that remained was to call people so that there would be many witnesses. Karen admitted to her sister that it was Lee Jai-ho who suggested this idea. It was then that the girl realized that after the incident, her husband did not visit her because he did not want to see the concubine's daughter. But Nadia still did not understand why they had to do so much if they could simply divorce. The protagonist understood that if her husband offered her a divorce, she would not contradict him. It turned out that all this was done so that the warrior hero's reputation would not be affected. Nadia began to wonder why her half-sister came here as soon as Lee Jai-ho became popular. However, these words did not hurt Karen, because they were said to someone she did not respect. The young woman said that no one can say whatever they want, because this is the only thing left for her. No one will accept someone who is abandoned by her husband, because his wife had an affair with another man. Moreover, the protagonist is an illegitimate daughter, so she will not be able to marry anyone other than a simple worker. Therefore, Karen decided that it was better for her sister to die with honor, and was willing to help in this. The story turns out that the father wanted to let Nadia stay, but she decided to commit suicide out of shame. So Lord Jai-ho suddenly lost his wife. As a result, only the main character's name will be tarnished, and the rest will come out clean. The girl tried to resist. Because she did not want to die, however, the forces were unequal. As sad as it was, Nadia knew that this is probably how her life would end. All her life, the heroine did what her father told her, and was always obedient. As a child, the lady always observed her stepmother's reaction, and could not even breathe without her permission. And the stepsister took everything best from the unfortunate child. In the end, the main character died after living only 23 years. It seemed that the girl's life would end like this, but instead, she returned to a day when she was only 20 years old. Nadia did not have a rope around her neck and did not understand at all how she could survive. In her dark consciousness, the girl definitely felt death enveloping her body, but she woke up completely healthy in her room. Moreover, everything around her looked the same as 3 years before Nadia's murder, which means that the lady had returned to the past. So, Nadia realized that she had the opportunity to take revenge on everyone who hurt her. The main character's selfish fiancé, who felt no pity for her. He must also pay for his sins. She also wanted revenge on her sister, who laughed while the girl was brutally killed. But most importantly, Nadia wanted to hurt her father, who used her, and then got rid of her. The lady was treated as if she were trash, and this really offended her. The girl thought about what others would do in her place if they had a second chance. Some might want to live for love, while others would prefer to live a long time in perfect health. But then the main character was distracted from her thoughts and told herself that Nadia should have rung the bell after waking up. The girl was bothered by the maid, who scolded the owner because the worker could not clean the room because of her. The maid noticed that Nadia was touching the mirror, so she ended up scolding the lady for that too. And while the maid was angry, the main character was worried that all this would turn out to be a dream. However, everything was very realistic and looked the same as 3 years before Nadia's murder. Moreover, it was this maid who passed alcohol to her lover on Karen's orders on the day of the banquet. The protagonist's thoughts about the cruelty of the trap at the banquet were reflected on her face, which angered the servant. But Nadia hurried to reassure her with words of thanks. The woman always cleans her room. After that, the girl decided to leave the room, and the maid did not expect to hear this. When the protagonist left her room, she ran into another woman who immediately turned to her lover. It turned out that His Majesty the King came to see the Duke, so Nadia also had to prepare for the meeting. Although the girl was surprised, she replied that she would soon be ready for such an important meeting. Once the main character was ready, she went to her father, Duke Bayasit, and the man met his daughter and told her that she was very late. However, the lady realized that she was already rushing to get ready, so she came as soon as she could. Nadia noticed that her father looked at her as if she were some kind of nullity, and in the past she was afraid of that look, and she humbly obeyed, trembling with fear. There was little time, so the Duke decided to tell his daughter everything on the way, and we would talk about the victory ceremony. The girl and Karen will prepare tea for the king, and moreover, the question will arise at the meeting whether Nadia will grant Lord Jai-ho a laurel wreath. So the heroine had to accept this. Then, the lady realized that His Majesty had come on the occasion of the ceremony to commemorate the triumph during the Calais expedition. In such ceremonies, a married young woman places a laurel wreath on the hero, for whose sake the ceremony is held. In other words, it was a long-standing tradition in which love was declared. But the problem is that, in this ceremony, one of those receiving the honor is a northerner, and therefore the worst enemy of the South. That is why they want to shift the focus to something else, allowing Nadia to present the wreath to Lee Jai-ho, and wanting to tie the hero to her. Even if the main character refuses, her father still does not listen to her, but she still needs a chance to break free from him. While the heroine was thinking, she and the Duke had already managed to reach His Majesty. The king was delighted with the appearance of the heroes and asked them to sit down quickly. His Majesty suggested that the Duke already knew the reason for his arrival, but Bayasit replied that he could not read minds. However, the king did not believe the man's words, so he ordered him not to pretend to be stupid. So, His Majesty still explained that the Kalai Expeditionary Force had demanded a victory ceremony. The Duke pointed out that the team deserved it, so they should do what is asked. However, the problem was not that, but who was on this team. After all, one of the leaders with the greatest merits is his enemy from the north, the Marquis of Winterfell. In this ceremony, the Marquis will receive a lot of attention, and the Northerners will be able to exaggerate again. So, the Duke replied that there was no need to worry about that, because the focus of the ceremony could be shifted to something else. The king was willing to listen to Bayasit's plan, and the girl was surprised by the seriousness with which His Majesty took her father's words. The Duke proposed to marry off the Marquis, using His Majesty's authority, and if the bride is the daughter of a southern noble, then it will be possible to prevent Winterfell from uniting with someone from the north. Hearing these words, the main character remembered the past in detail. After Nadia and Li Jai-ho got married, as a reward for their success in the expedition, the Marquis of Winterfell also got married, and the Marquis's bride was a girl from the family that her father introduced to the king. According to rumors, the girl constantly cried because of Winterfield's harshness, and in the end she ran away. Then the girl realized that she could become the Marquis's bride, and thus avoid marrying Li Jai-ho. However, Nadia cannot rush, so it was too early to talk about it. His Majesty considered the Duke's idea good, but he did not know who would voluntarily give their daughter to the enemy. The man told the king that, for the good of the country, people would surely give up their daughter. Hearing these words, the girl realized that this was the perfect moment for her. Therefore, the main character addressed the king to say something. And while the Duke tried to stop his daughter, she told him that she could go to the enemy camp. The father did not expect such words from someone who constantly obeyed him and had no opinion of her own. Meanwhile, Nadia continued to say that she was from the Bayasit family, so she was trustworthy. And although not everyone was happy with these words, His Majesty listened to everything attentively. As a result, the main character asked to be allowed to marry the enemy for the king's sake and the well-being of the country. The girl was happy, because thanks to this step, she would no longer be a pawn in her father's hands. And then the father said that it seemed his daughter simply did not understand what she was talking about. The Duke decided that Nadia simply did not know her relationship with the Marquis. So, His Majesty also thought that Bayasit and Winterfell were sworn enemies. But still, the king was interested in hearing the idea that the main character wanted to propose. The girl said that at the next ceremony, she would like to present a laurel wreath to the Marquis. The Duke considered this a stupid decision, because the enemy simply could not accept Nadia's wreath. But the lady was confident, because until now no one had refused a laurel wreath. However, the man was still against it, because these things are decided in advance. And it was already planned that no one would present the wreath to Li Jai-ho. The girl understood that her whole life depended on this conversation, so she was not going to give up. So the main character promised that the Marquis of Winterfell would not reject her. Then the father asked his daughter why she was so sure of this. And all because the Marquis himself demanded this ceremony. And if someone turns away from the wreath, then all attention is directed to the poor one, who was denied recognition. Although people love the hero, the love between two is much more interesting and exciting. People will quickly forget all merits, so no one will dare to destroy everything he strived for. Therefore, the Marquis of Winterfell will accept the wreath so as not to lose his glory. Moreover, His Majesty can influence so that the enemy definitely cannot refuse. The girl asked the king to insist on the marriage under the pretext of a plea from the official's daughter. Then, the man will become a benevolent ruler who wants to fulfill the love of a noble lady. His Majesty pointed out that although this plan was insidious, it was very convincing. But the king was still worried about having to send the Duke's daughter to the enemy camp. Therefore, the ruler decided to ask the protagonist's father for his opinion. The man replied that he did not know his daughter's wonderful plan. So, in this ceremony, Nadia will still present the wreath to the Marquis of Winterfell. After all the important matters were resolved, His Majesty the King got into the carriage and left. It was then that the Duke told his daughter that she seemed to be completely crazy. And the main character's sister said that the girl acted very stupidly. Karin was surprised that no one was planning to go north to the enemies. However, the father ordered his daughter to be quiet because the main character's fate did not concern him. After this, the man demanded that the lady explain herself because she began to act not according to plan. The girl understood that even though she had received His Majesty's permission, if she could not convince her father, she would lose again. So Nadia replied that she did not wish to marry a stranger, but that Bayasid blood flowed through her. But the Duke was not convinced of the sole reason for his daughter's action. The man believed that due to unnecessary pride, Nadia would now have to give all honors to the Marquis of Winterfell. Although the girl was scared, she understood that this was the only way to stop being a pawn. And then the main character said that the Marquis would experience honor only for a moment. For everyone now, it was much more important to avoid riots, and that is why they tried to divert people's interest from the ceremony. The Duke was surprised that his daughter knew this and understood that he had hit the mark. The reason why this man reacts so strongly to the glory of the Northerners is that the imperial family is now, without exaggeration, a puppet of the Bayasit duchy. The king himself is in the Duke's hands, but at the same time, he has the most vulnerable position. There have been many cases where in times of violence, like now, provincial leaders rebelled. So the girl's father is worried. Even if it is not at the ceremony, the group may meet in secret. So it would be better for the Bayasit family to observe what is happening. And the ceremony is simply the best place to track your enemies. If Nadia marries a marquis, her family will quickly learn the opinions of the North, and thus strengthen their position. After hearing his daughter's plan, the Duke realized that the girl's words were logical. Thanks to the main character, it will be possible to quickly learn the enemy's movements, and this is a good opportunity to place a spy. Therefore, the man agreed to do what his daughter Nadia wanted. The Duke's other daughter was shocked by this decision, but her father did not want to listen to her. After this, the father asked Nadia what she really wanted, because he could not do it for her sake. The Duke tried to find out what the main character wanted in return for such a sacrifice. So, the girl replied that she wanted freedom, and then asked to live as a rich widow when her husband, the Marquis, lost in battle, and all because Nadia did not want to bear her family name under any circumstances. The main character does not want to be associated with anyone, but wants a normal life. So the girl asked her father if he could promise her this. In the end, the deal was successful, and from the first day, Nadia returned to the past. She was able to avoid marrying Li Jai-ho. Moreover, the puppet Karen was kicked out, because the maid was stealing things from her mistress. The protagonist was happy to have the opportunity to deal with everything by herself. But the girl understood that she was still far from revenge and needed to explain her future plans in detail. After a while, the Marquis was informed that the preparations for the ceremony were finished. Therefore, Winterfell should have led his group, because they were already leaving. Flower petals flew everywhere to congratulate the team on their victory. Seeing the soldiers marching in formation, the people greeted them with joy. Everything started exactly like in the main character's past life. From the clothes and jewelry the girl was currently wearing, to the places where everyone was sitting. Nadia understood that if she had not intervened, everything would have continued as before. Karen asked her sister what she would do if a crack appeared in the girl's pendant. It turned out that the sister lent the pendant to the main character because it was her father's order. And once the ceremony was over, Nadia was obliged to return the jewelry. The father hurried to reassure his daughters because the detachment would arrive soon, and the girls needed to get ready. After this, the Duke told Nadia not to ruin it and handed the wreath to Glen Winterfell with dignity. There was only one thing in which the ceremony of the girl's past life differed from the current one: the hero to whom she presented the wreath. When Nadia turned her attention to the Marquis, the man next to him also came into her field of vision, and it was Li Jai-ho, to whom the main character gave a wreath in a past life. If the girl had done nothing, Li Jai-ho would have become the hero of this ceremony. But fortunately, no one could avoid interactions with her ex-husband. Although in a past life the heroes did not marry for love, the bride felt that there was some kind of connection between them. The ceremony finally began, and His Majesty told the men that he would grant them glory for their deeds. The ruler heard that Winterfell's merits were especially high in this expedition, and this made the king's soul feel very warm. Glenn responded to the praise by saying that the rumors were simply exaggerated. His Majesty recalled that the previous ruler of Winterfell was an exceptional knight. The Marquis's loyalty is worthy of praise, and if his father, chained to his bed, had learned of his son's insinuations, he would have been happy. Everyone knew that the most painful topic for Glenn was related to his father, but the king still talked about it. After all the words, the ruler also added that the Winterfell family should be rewarded for their loyalty. And to conclude, His Majesty observed that the Marquis spoke very seriously. By order of the king, the official ceremony began, and everyone started congratulating the heroes on their victory in the Kalia expedition. Immediately after, the greeting of the families began, and the Duke of Bayasit was the first to meet Marquis Glenn. However, Bayasit addressed the young man incorrectly because he did not call him Marquis, and therefore, Winterfell corrected this mistake. Then the man noticed that Glenn was very similar to the former Marquis in his ardor. And then the Duke noticed that he started talking about the person with whom the accident happened, and he said he was sorry. After this, it was time to present the gifts, so Nadia ran towards the members of the expedition. Seeing the wreath, Glenn understood why the king agreed to hold the ceremony so quickly. Winterfell assumed that the owner of the wreath would be Lee Jai-ho. This means that the ceremony itself was only for one hero, and not for the whole team. The Marquis accepted the injustice, and began to think that there was probably a lot of work to do at home. It would be good if His Majesty paid the Winterfell family enough as a reward. However, Glenn's assumptions turned out to be wrong because no one approached him. At first, the Marquis did not understand why Bayasit's daughter was in front of him. Then, Winterfell bowed to the lady and told her that he had made a mistake due to his excitement. And then Glenn told the girl that Lee Jai-ho was behind him. The Marquis advised the heroine to walk slowly towards the boy, and everyone would turn a blind eye to her small mistake due to excitement. However, Nadia told Winterfell that she had not made a mistake at all, and that she had come to the right person. These words surprised the Marquis, because he did not expect such an outcome of events at all. Nadia told Winterfell that he had been on her mind for a long time and, therefore, she asked him to accept her laurel wreath. The girl confessed to Glenn that she fell in love with him at first sight, as soon as she saw him. The protagonist said that she felt that the Marquis was the one who could take care of her for the rest of her life. Hearing all this, Winterfell was increasingly surprised by the girl's words. Then, the Marquis asked if no one knew exactly what it means when an adult girl gives a wreath to a man. Glenn seemed much ruder than they say he is, but the girl still decided to confess her love to him. Winterfell continued to look silently at the heroine, and then the king elbowed him, reminding him that the beautiful lady was waiting for an answer. Then the Marquis replied that he did not deserve this wreath, so he could not accept it, because he felt it was some kind of trap. However, Nadia expected such a reaction, because she knew that the young man would not accept the wreath so easily. While Winterfell was explaining to His Majesty, the main character grabbed his clothes to draw his attention. According to Nadia, if Glenn is worried that the girl is the daughter of a concubine, he can simply accept the wreath without worrying about her. Thus, the protagonist managed to arouse pity for herself among the people. Everyone began to ask the Marquis to accept the wreath and not vent his anger on the young lady. The people felt sorry for the girl, so they asked Bayasit's daughter to accept her sincere love. Winterfell realized that the plan was to ruin the ceremony with his own hands. After this, the Marquis finally made up his mind and took the wreath that the young lady had brought him. Then Glenn said that he would continue a long conversation with Nadia later. So the main character realized that fortunately, everything went well for her. The girl managed and thus could change her future. After the ceremony, the father began to praise Nadia and said that she had done well today. The Duke thought that the Marquis's confused face was worth seeing. The daughter replied to her father that she did not need to thank him so much. Bayazid was about to get into the carriage when someone unexpectedly called him. It turned out to be Lord Jiho, who urgently wanted to speak with the Duke. Then the man noticed that the hero was most likely very tired after coming here, so it was better for him to go and rest. The Lord asked about the rumors that Lady Nadia was supposed to present the wreath to him. Jiho wondered what happened that the whole plan changed. The Duke explained everything by saying that it had happened and that the matter was urgent, so it was not possible to inform the Lord. After this, the man told the hero that in the future, he would find a more suitable partner for him. But the young man rushed over not to look for a new bride, because he only wanted to know why everything had changed. Bayazid replied that there was a reason for this, but that this was not the place to talk about it. However, Jai-ho did not want to calm down and said that this was too much. The Duke did not want to listen to all this, so he reminded the boy that the ceremony had already taken place, so nothing could be fixed. In any case, the man admitted his guilt and promised the Lord that he would make amends later. After this, Bayazid asked Jai-ho if he understood exactly what the Duke was talking about. Then, the young man realized that he definitely could not win the argument. So he agreed with the man. After that, the father told Nadia and Karen to get into the carriage. Then the main character turned her attention to the Lord, looking at him before leaving. At first, the girl was very surprised by the facial expression her husband from a past life had. But then, Nadia thought that she no longer cared what the Lord thought. Therefore, the main character got into the carriage with a calm soul, not caring about anything. Now the girl does not care how Lord Jai-ho feels, because he was the first to betray her. After this, the course of events passes directly to the Winterfell mansion. There the Marquis and another young man commented on what happened at the ceremony. It turned out that almost everyone is talking about Nadia Aglen's declaration of love. Therefore, the Marquis of Winterfell needed to react somehow to this before being forced to marry. However, the hero understood that it was already too late to try to stop the rumors. Moreover, the Marquis received a letter from the royal family and asked the young man to read it. Although veiled, this letter tells Glenn to marry. If Winterfell continues to refuse, others will see it as disobedience to the king's orders. This news surprised the young man, who did not understand why His Majesty was doing this to Glenn. The Marquis's army and lands pay stable taxes, but the ruler still doubted him. Then, the hero suggested that it was Duke Bayasit who was saying unpleasant things about him, because he wanted to condemn the young man for rebellion. The northern territory, where Winterfell is located, was not always part of the kingdom, but it was subjugated 100 years ago. The northern army defended the northern border from monsters, which ensured safety and fertility in the south. But the southerners, seeing all this, considered the northerners savage and terrifying. Then, the previous Marquis and Marchioness of Winterfell had an accident due to someone's conspiracy, and most likely, the Duke of Bayasit is suspected of organizing the accident. And then, unexpectedly, the Duke's daughter gives the Marquis of Winterfell a laurel wreath. There are two reasons why the king wants the marriage to take place, one of which is to prevent the northerners from forming an alliance through marriage. The second reason is that they want to send a spy to the Marquis. Thanks to this, the royal family knows about a possible rebellion before anyone else. But this was not all the information from the young man, because then he remembered Lee Jai-ho. According to the ceremony attendees, Lady Nadia was supposed to present the wreath to the Lord. They say that Lee Jai-ho was terribly surprised that the main character did not approach him. There were rumors that Lady Nadia and the Lord secretly promised to unite hearts and lives. It turns out that the plan related to Jai-ho was changed quickly, and the hero was not informed about it. Glenn realized that he was not mistaken in thinking that the laurel wreath was specifically intended for the Lord. In any case, the Marquis must do what His Majesty wants. Otherwise, the South will have a reason to attack the North. Winterfell also believed that there was no need to worry about the fact that his wife would be from the Bayasit family. After all, the girl was simply a beautiful daughter of the Duke, who herself could do nothing in a foreign land. Glenn doubted that Nadia could endure the cold attitude of the servants for at least a week. The main character was considered the spoiled daughter of a duke, so they really did not believe in her strength. The Marquis thought that his future wife would want to go home herself, and he would have nothing to do with it. As a result, the Winterfell and Bayasit families united in marriage. The hero's wedding took place in Winterfell territory, and the engagement took place in the capital. Subsequently, a banquet was held at the Bayasit mansion to celebrate the birth of a new family. Most of the nobles who were at this celebration mocked the bride, but the main character's father enjoyed what was happening because everything went according to plan. Nadia decided to ignore everyone and simply invited her husband to dance. The girl had to play the role of a noble woman in love, so there was no time to be distracted by others. At the ceremony, the lady felt that the Marquis was even more distrustful of the Bayasit family. Therefore, the main character must first prove to her husband that she is not dangerous. And then the young man approached Nadia and asked what she was thinking about, to which the girl admitted that she was thinking about how handsome Glenn was. The husband replied that Nadia should not call him by his first name, because they are not close, and that she should only call him Marquis of Winterfell. Then the main character, calling the man Glenn again, agreed with his words. Because of this, an awkward pause occurred between the spouses and they both simply fell silent. And suddenly, the young man let go of the main character's hand. The Marquis began to leave, asking the girl if she could smile so cheerfully in the north. After this, Winterfell added that he would definitely check if his wife could endure in his house. Seeing this scene, many began to whisper about how poor Nadia was, as she fell in love with a northerner. Because the heroine lowered her head, many decided that she could not lift it out of shame. However, Nadia was glad that her husband had left, because she could no longer force a smile. It was difficult for the girl, because her whole body cramped from the fact that she forced herself to smile all day. And then, the lady heard someone calling her, interrupting her alone time on the balcony. It turned out to be Jai-ho, who seemed to be looking for Nadia, because he was happy to find her. Then the main character asked the Lord what was wrong, because she did not understand what he wanted. The young man admitted that he came to ask the lady something. After this, Jai-ho asked the girl if she really hated marrying him. Nadia did not expect such a question at all, so she didn't even know what to answer. The Lord continued to say that it seemed better for the girl to endure humiliation and go to the very center of the enemy camp. It turns out that the protagonist likes this difficult path more than marriage with Jai-ho. Then the lady replied that she did not understand what the man was talking about, since it was not clear from the beginning that they would marry. It turned out that the Duke had already told the young man that the plans had changed because of Nadia. The Lord did not understand why he was not worthy of hearing the truth, and decided that it was because his origin was unknown. The girl did not understand what was happening to Jai-ho, because, according to her sister, he was the first to betray her. And then the main character replied to the man that he was also not happy with their marriage. The young man replied that he had never said such a thing, but that it was clear even without words. Jai-ho was worried about being discriminated against because of his origin, so he wanted to marry a girl from a noble family. And therefore, Nadia was not the best option, but Karen would have been much more suitable. After this, the young man fell silent, not knowing how to respond to the lady's words. The main character decided that, since Jai-ho was silent, Karen told the truth about him. The girl told the Lord that they were not suitable for each other, so they should take separate paths. After that, Nadia left the balcony, leaving the young man alone with his thoughts. But the girl did not return to the celebration. She simply found another deserted place. It was very difficult to pretend to act all day, so the main character was very tired. Nadia was glad to have found a place where she could be alone, however. Then she heard a noise. It turned out that her half-sister was confidently heading towards the main character. Karen, with a smile on her face, asked if she and the girl could talk about something. Then the lady asked her sister why she had come here, and she herself thought that they could not leave her alone for a minute. After this, the stepsister asked Nadia why she was following the man and disgracing her family. Karen explained that as the true daughter of the family, it was her responsibility to warn the lady. The girl assumed that the main character wanted to attract her father's attention, and that's why she did it. The sister called Nadia only a pawn, and the northerner's wife agreed with her. And then the lady told Karen that she were not so different. This is because since Nadia could not marry Lord Jai-ho, now it is the turn of the Duke's second daughter. But these words greatly angered Karen, because she believed she was different from her sister. The main character did not stop saying that for the Duke, a daughter is just the achievement of a goal. And while the girl was cursing, Nadia noticed a necklace on her neck, which turned out to be her mother's necklace. Then Karen noticed that all her sister's attention was focused on the decoration. The Duchess's daughter also knew that the necklace she was wearing was a gift from her father to her mother Nadia. Only the Duke gave this decoration because he thought the concubine would have a son. But in the end, a girl was born. For the main character, this was dear, so her sister asked if she wanted to take this gift. However, Karen said that she would leave it if the lady knelt down and begged her. Nadia had to apologize to her sister and promise her that she would never bother her again. If the main character begs convincingly, her sister will forgive her. Otherwise, Karen will simply throw away the jewelry, because she has many trinkets of this kind. Then Nadia clarified if her sister would definitely give up the necklace if she knelt down. The Duchess's daughter promised, but thought she would still not return the jewelry. But the main character did not want to give in to her sister so easily, so she simply tried to take away what she loved. However, Karen began to resist, and because of this she could not keep her balance. And she fell. After this, the Duchess's daughter began to threaten the girl, telling her that she would not let this go unpunished. Then the protagonist asked her sister what she could do. No one understood that the necklace would not be returned to her no matter how much she begged. Something similar also happened in the girl's past life, and then she listened to Karen. But she could not return the necklace. As a child, the protagonist wondered why her sister hated her so much. So she tried to change it somehow. But then, Nadia realized that Karen hated her for no reason. So now the lady has given her sister a real reason to hate. The Duchess's daughter, for her part, did not understand if this was exactly the Nadia she knew. Karen got goosebumps because her sister was acting like a completely different person. People rushed over at the girl's screams and began to say that they needed to bring something to cover the lady who had fallen into the water. They immediately began to help the heroine and asked if she was okay. As a result, the girl's father ran to the noise to find out what was happening. Karen immediately ran into her father's arms, and he asked his daughter how she got wet. Then, the girl pointed at Nadia and said that this dirty girl pushed her into the pond. The Duchess's daughter thought that this would be the end of her sister. Therefore, the man asked the main character if what Karen said was true. But then no one clarified how her sister, despite all her hatred, could lie like that. The lady said that Karen came to the edge, and she, in turn, tried to pull her out. Then, the Duchess's daughter tried to tell in detail what really happened, and she let slip that she had threatened her sister with the necklace. The girl realized too late that she had said too much, exposing only herself. People immediately began to whisper that the younger sister had a bad temper, and moreover, they loved her more since she had the jewelry of the older daughter's mother. Karen tried to explain that everything was wrong, but people thought completely differently. So the Duke asked his daughter to be quiet so she wouldn't say anything else. And then he told her to go back to the room. But the girl kept saying that it was unfair and asked her father to listen to her. The man told the others that there was just a small fight between his daughters. But everyone kept saying that the noble Bayasit daughter had disgraced her family. However, for Nadia all this was unimportant, because the most important thing was to be able to return the necklace to her mother. Now the main character can safely leave this place, because nothing else holds her here. After the ceremony, the Northerners went home and were already close to Winterfell lands. Glenn asked a guy named Fabian to be quiet, but he wanted to ask his master something. And no matter how much the Marquis asked the young man to return to his place, he did not calm down. What Fabian was interested in was whether the mistress's confession was sincere. To this, the man replied that if his subordinate was going to keep saying such nonsense, then it would be better for him to leave. The couple felt that during the ceremony, the girl's face expressed sincere emotions. So, Glenn advised the young man not to rely solely on the lady's appearance. After all, this was not an ordinary girl, but the daughter of a duke, who was considered the Marquis's enemy. So such an innocent mistress can stab Glenn in the back at any moment. And it was not clear whether the young lady wanted to use her dowry to help her family in difficult times, or if she was simply going to watch her enemies. After hearing the knight's opinion, Fabian realized that there was some truth in his words. And since he understood everything, the guy had to return to his place, because he was Nadia's guard. The young man began to worry about walking next to the lady after learning about her. And then the girl noticed the boy and said that she would like to talk to him. The protagonist knew that the young man had been appointed as her guard, so she asked his name. After this, the young man modestly introduced himself as Fabian Knox, to which no one replied that he had a very nice name, to which he thanked her. After that, the main character looked closely at her guard. The girl realized that Fabian felt uncomfortable with her, as she had thought, and the lady understands why this is happening, because everyone knows that the Bayasit families and Winterfell are enemies. However, the protagonist promised that soon everyone will understand that her feelings are real. Then the young man remembered his master, who told him not to trust appearances. But the image of Glenn gradually disappeared from Fabian's thoughts, and he told the lady that he was simply very shy. After that, the boy asked if it was Nadia's first time in the north, and then decided to tell her about this place while they were driving. The girl thanked the young man for the conversation because she was bored before. The lady was happy to have managed to break the barrier of the younger gentleman. After some time traveling, the main character fell asleep in the carriage. But then, Nadia was awakened by someone who suddenly knocked on her window. It turned out that Fabian woke up the girl, who wanted to call her that way. After this, the young man asked the lady to go out for a while. And then, the main character realized that she had already arrived at Winterfell Castle. The girl knew that the preparations for the wedding ceremony were rushed, but she did not expect it at all. Nadia's wedding dress was brought by Glenn's mother, and the wedding was not far off, so it was decided to choose it. Now in the north, there is an influx of monsters and a season of scarcity, so people are not in the best situation. Due to all these factors, it was decided to plan a small wedding ceremony. The maid wanted to calm the girl, but she replied that everything was fine. According to Nadia, if Glenn is by her side, then the size of the wedding doesn't matter. Besides, the main protagonist is now a marquise, so she must think about her people. The stranger who approached replied that since the lady thinks so, then the woman can be at ease. It turns out that these words were spoken by Mrs. Grace Ground, who is Glenn's aunt. The former marquise has already died, and the former marquis is bedridden, so Grace is now the senior lady of this family. The woman noticed that the dress fits Nadia perfectly, so Glenn will go crazy when he sees it. Then the main character thanked the lady for these words, telling her she would be happy. Aunt Glenn supposed that, thanks to the girl's father, the marquis was rude even to her. But Grace told the lady not to worry, because she was very beautiful, so in time her husband would open his heart to her. And the lady herself promised to help the girl with this, so everything should be fine. The main character thanked the woman for such kind words, which she promised to remember. After that, Grace said she had to leave, so she said goodbye to the girl. And finally, Aunt Glenn asked if the lady knew what the most important thing in seduction was. And then she advised her to prepare for it. Then, the main character realized that these words referred to her wedding night. Nadia thought her husband wouldn't even want to touch her, and therefore would refuse to spend the night together. But the girl didn't know what to do if the marquis offered to spend the night together. The ceremony began, and everyone watched the bride's entrance. And the lady, in turn, kept thinking about Grace's words. The bride and groom began to say their vows, as is customary at weddings. First, the priest asked the marquis if he wanted to take Nadia as his wife, to which he answered affirmatively. Then they asked the bride if she would accept Glenn as her husband, but the girl did not answer because she was still thinking about the future. The heroine had to be asked again, and then she answered that she would accept him. After this, the newlyweds had to seal their vow with a kiss. The main character was sure that Winterfell would just pretend they were kissing. However, the marquis truly kissed his bride, which she did not expect at all. After this, the heroes were declared husband and wife, and the girl remained in shock. As night approached, Nadia didn't know what to do because her husband would arrive soon. Lady was very scared by the fact that she would have to sleep with Winterfell. But all the girl's thoughts were interrupted by Glenn, who unexpectedly came to her. Although the protagonist was worried, she told her husband that she was looking forward to it. However, the marquis said he would never contact the daughter of the Duke of Bayasit, and Winterfell came only to say this in person. After that, the man started to leave, and the girl started asking him to stop. Glenn left Nadia's room, under which the maids had been the whole time, and immediately after this, the servants heard crying and words that the girl's feelings were sincere. While the protagonist showed with her whole appearance how much she was suffering, in her thoughts there was only joy. Nadia hoped that her husband would never change his mind about his decision, and then the lady remembered that she hadn't eaten normally all day. After the main character had eaten her fill, she went to bed alone. There was nothing else to worry about, so Nadia quickly started falling asleep. The next day, the maids were already discussing what happened the day before. One of the girls supposed that the couple had fought, and that was why the Lord was angry. And one maid heard that Nadia cried for a long time after talking to her husband. According to Aiden, the lady looked like an unrequited lover who had been rejected. The girls were surprised by this behavior of the protagonist because they thought she would be arrogant. The maids didn't even notice that the young couple was listening to their entire conversation. Then the master told the young man that it was necessary to force the servants to keep their mouths shut. However, the Marquis of Winterfell replied that there was no need to do anything. After that, Glenn asked his subordinates what his wife was doing now. Fabian replied that since Nadia officially became Marquise, she had to take care of the house. But to the man, this only meant that his wife began to spy on him completely. After this, the Marquis of Winterfell reminded Fabian that he was the girl's guard. The young man immediately guessed that there was some kind of hint in this reminder. And this turned out to be true, because Glenn wanted the guard to watch Nadia. Fabian had to observe whether the main character was doing anything suspicious. And for this, the young man will have to always be by the Marquise's side, informing her of everything. When the guard started doing his job, the lady realized that it was Glenn who sent him. The young man replied that from that day on, he would take care of his mistress. To this, Nadia replied that she was very happy because her husband took great care of her. However, the boy came to watch the girl and not to protect her, as she decided. so he even felt a little embarrassed. Fabian said he would wait at the door, and that the heroine could quietly take care of her business. The young man had no idea that his lover actually understood the real reason for his presence by her side. Somehow, it was necessary to convince everyone that Nadia was not a spy, so she first asked Gordon to bring her the business book. The protagonist began to study the book he had brought, and when she finished, she turned to the butler. The girl wondered why this family had so many debts. Gordon explained everything by saying that this is a characteristic of the North, so there is nothing to be surprised about. Every few years they are attacked by a wave of monsters, and their lands are very depleted, so there are really no resources. However, the North must receive rewards from the king for killing monsters every year. The butler said that thanks to that money, they managed to get to this day. The main character had no idea that war required so many expenses. Gordon said that someone demanded that they settle this debt, and then realized that he had said too much. And then Nadia quickly realized that they were talking about her father. Anyway, the lady prepared a plan to make money, but she didn't think the debt would be so large. Unexpectedly, Gordon said he had a good solution for this problem. The butler suggested that the girl use her dowry to pay off their debts. After all, if the main character helps, the Marquis will be very happy about it. Nadia supposed they wanted to test her and ask her to solve their financial problems. However, the Marquise replied that it was impossible, which greatly surprised the butler, who continued to persuade her. Although the girl wanted to help the Winterfell family, but not in this way. After all, Nadia's dowry did not solve the problem in the long run. While this might help this year, it won't help next year, and eventually the debt will reappear. And it will grow. In conclusion, the protagonist decided that it was necessary to correct the peculiarity of their territory. Fabian listened to this whole dialogue, standing outside the door, memorizing every word. After this, the young man told everything to Glenn, and the only thing he got from the story was that Nadia could not use a single coin from the dowry. But Fabian corrected the lord, because the main character spoke poorly. According to the girl, instead of paying the debt now, it is better to start increasing the dowry. However, only Fabian believed the lady, and the rest believed that she only looked good. Therefore, all the guards began to doubt whether the guy could be trusted to spy on Nadia. While the lady was thinking about how she needed to make money quickly, she suddenly heard shouts. After this, the main character saw a butler trying to explain something to some strangers. The lady didn't know what was happening, so she ran to Gordon to find out everything. Then, the rest of the people introduced themselves as Shylock, Wayne of the Northern Merchants Alliance, and Katarina from the Creta Trading Company. But the Marquise wanted to get out of the formalities as soon as possible and tell them about the topic of conversation. And after that, Shylock told Nadia to give him all her money, because the day for the repayment of the funds borrowed by the Marquis would soon arrive. Everyone had already heard that the girl brought an impressive dowry with her, so they demanded that she settle her debts. Otherwise, the people will take back the wind-protected plain that remained as collateral. But this could not be allowed, because the plain was the only fertile land in the impoverished territory. It was then that the main character finally remembered how the Marquis paid off his debts in a past life. It turns out that Winterfell simply decided to give the people the land they demanded. The girl clarified exactly when the debt payment day would arrive, and it turned out to be in 3 months. Nadia understood that if the plain was taken away from them, the Winterfell family would be completely impoverished. The Marquis would not even be saved, thanks to the powerful army he possesses. After all, if Glenn has no finances, he will not be able to become the leader who united the North. Therefore, the protagonist asked the others to give the Marquis 2 months. And if the debt payment is postponed for 2 more months, no one will solve this problem. However, Shylock did not want to accept this so easily, because he still had questions. After all, the girl brought an impressive dowry with her, so it was not clear why she needed 2 months. The main character decided that she would use all her money for business. Everyone was shocked that instead of paying off their debts, the lady was going to start a business. The Winterfell family had close ties with merchants from the northern regions, so it would be good if they considered a long-term friendship to create a better future. And then Nadia added that she would never forget the help given to her family. If the business fails, the merchants will be able to recover the lands left as collateral. After all this, Shylock said he admired the Marquise's wisdom. The merchants still had to discuss this, but the lady was willing to wait. Shylock added at the end that he would definitely give an answer that no one would like. However, the only thing in the man's mind was that this was stupidity, because the business of a girl who had lived her whole life without knowing troubles would not succeed. The merchant had already decided to seize the best lands. When the people left, the protagonist was very happy because she was tired of them. After this, the butler asked what kind of business the lady was talking about, because that way they could lose the plane. Nadia told Gordon that they would return all the money as planned. The Marquise asked the butler to invite everyone who wanted to postpone the debt payment day to the mansion, because she needed to buy something from them. And all this is done for the good of the business that the protagonist wants to open. The members of the Winterfell family must show what those who trust them will receive, and they are willing to help. Nadia told the merchant that the business she was planning was creating herbal tea from the thorny life, and those who heard the Marquise's idea only thought she was talking nonsense. The thorny life was a weed that only the poor consumed. This plant has no value because it is a common weed, but the main character asked the merchants to buy thorny manure from her wholesale. Wayne replied that if the lady wants to buy in market volumes, then she will need capital. And then Nadia admitted that she plans to spend her entire dowry on marijuana. The merchant thought it would be better to buy dresses and jewelry because they could be resold. The man wondered why the butler didn't dissuade his lover, because the plan was clearly a failure. Although Wayne initially decided that the girl wanted to start a business, her idea was unreasonable. And while the merchant was thinking about how stupid she was, Katarina intervened in the conversation and said it directly. The girl told Nadia that the vine had no value and that it was better to buy good herbs. Moreover, if we consider transportation and storage costs, the lady will only incur losses. And then the Marquise unexpectedly replied to the merchants that they were mistaken about something. After all, the main character invited people to hire, not to argue. After this, the merchants immediately agreed to deliver the goods the girl wanted. Nadia replied that all hope was only in these people, so she asked them to take care of everything. 2 months had already passed since this incident, and the debt payment day was approaching. Mrs. Grace was worried that the Marquise still only cared about her useless herb. Aunt Glenn was worried that he would keep seeing his wife doing foolish things. However, the Marquis had no right to interfere with the girl, because she started the business with her dowry money. The woman believed that the household could not be entrusted to the heroine, because she had no financial knowledge. It's just that the young man didn't want to listen to his aunt's reasoning, so he scolded her. Then, Mrs. Grace quickly realized that she hadn't watched her tongue. But the woman shared her thoughts only because she was thinking about the future of the family. The aunt reminded the Marquis of Winterfell of the debt payment day, which did not make him happy at all. And then, suddenly, the butler burst into the master's office and asked if Glenn had heard any important news. However, the young man didn't understand anything, as he hadn't received any news. Gordon then cheerfully told the Marquis the news that they had been saved. It turned out that the Winterfell family would no longer have to abandon the plane, and all thanks to Nadia. These words surprised Glenn, because he was sure that his wife's business was not generating income. But life was not only in full swing in the north, but something terrible was happening in the southern town. A mother felt sorry because her son contracted a terrible illness. The girl's condition worsened before her eyes, and her hands began to darken, which deprived the woman of any hope. It turned out that the child fell ill with the plague, and this was not an isolated case. Unfortunately, in recent months there hasn't been a day when corpses weren't burned. Not only this village was suffering, but all the lands of the kingdom, starting from the southern territories. So everyone was hoping for a cure. And then a third man ran up to the two men and asked if they had heard the news. Then a young man ran up and said that they had found a cure for the plague. Everyone found out that it was tea made from thorny life herbs, and everyone said it could help heal. But the merchants, upon hearing this news, immediately decided to buy healing herbs. However, the merchants' plan failed because someone had already bought all the thorny vines. And this person was the Marquise, who was now watching people buy tea from her. To the delight of all the neighbors, the protagonist bought a large amount of the plant, so there was enough for everyone. People were happy that the medicine was very cheap, because even the poor could afford it. To this, the guard replied that everything was thanks to Nadia, because she was the one who made sure everyone could be cured. A decree was issued to start supplying herbal tea at an affordable price, and start in the areas where the situation is most severe. It is forbidden to increase the price or resell, as well as store the herbs. Everything possible was done to reduce losses among the poor. However, the southern territories might think that the North specifically monopolized all the medicines for the epidemic to flourish in the South. But the probability of this happening was small. Moreover, it was Wayne who bought all the vines, not the Winterfell family. And besides, the main character was the daughter of the Duke of the Southern Bayasit. As a result, the thorny vines sold out faster than originally expected. Thanks to this, the merchants who agreed to wait and help with the business received great benefits. With the help of her business, Nadia was finally able to get rid of all her debts. The girl paid the merchants the total amount, and this ended the debt relationship between Winterfell and the Creta Trading Company. But no one could fully believe that the Marquise was capable of paying the debt, because no one believed in her. Moreover, the lady offered cooperation only to those who agreed to wait. After this, Nadia turned to Shylock, noticing that he was not having a good conversation with the other merchants, since he wasn't writing to her. It was then that the man realized that the main character was simply testing them. When they finished with the debts, the girl asked those who helped her with the business to stay, and the rest to hurry up and leave. The lady said goodbye to Shylock and told him she would look forward to seeing him again. The man replied that he would also wait, and until then, may everything be well with Nadia. But in his thoughts, the merchant was angry with the Marquise because he wanted to trick her. But it turned out the other way around. After receiving the money, everyone left quietly and Glenn watched. His wife approached the Marquis and asked if he believed her now, because she had settled their debts. But the young man was alarmed by the fact that the girl could not see the future. However, somehow he found out what would happen. Nadia explained everything by saying that when she was in the south, she saw a report from the head of the lands. And then she supposed that the plague would spread throughout the kingdom. However, it was still unclear how the main character found out about the medicine. Then the girl talked about a maid who led a nomadic life and spoke about her life. And one day, the nomad shared information that the vine herb can help with a deadly disease when heat covers the whole body. Of course, all this was lies from the Marquise, but she couldn't tell the truth. After this, Glenn apologized to his wife for misunderstanding her. The man didn't understand why Nadia was helping him, because her father was an enemy of the Marquis. Winterfell understood that if the Duke found out who his daughter was helping, he wouldn't like it. The Marquise replied to this that the reason for all her actions was love for her husband. The young man was annoyed because the main character brought up love again, in which he did not believe. And since no one helped Glenn, now he must fulfill the girl's request. The lady really wanted to tell her husband everything that was in her soul. But in the end, the Marquise only asked Winterfell to hug her once. The hero expected any request, but not such a simple one, so he was very surprised. And the protagonist, on the contrary, asked the Marquis if this request was too difficult for him. However, the young man only thought that his wife had a different desire. For example, Glenn could punish the gossiping maids or finally return all the money spent on him. To this, Nadia replied that if she had used such techniques, she would not have become a member of the Winterfell family. And then, the protagonist asked her husband to fulfill her request. After that, the man agreed that he could fulfill such a wish. The moment the Marquis approached his wife, he realized that she smelled very nice. And then, the couple was distracted by a voice announcing that it was time for a business meeting. Therefore, the main character apologized to Glenn and told him it was time to leave. Finally, Nadia thanked Winterfell for fulfilling her wish. But in the Marquise's thoughts, there was only the question of whether the man was starting to trust her. Then the lady went to a meeting, where she asked from the door how things were going. Then they told the girl that thanks to the double accounting she taught others, everything was going well. Nadia had divided expenses and income into two parts, which makes tracking the flow of money easier. The main character added that she didn't come up with this method herself, but simply learned it from a person who came from afar. The Marquise said that this man knew many things, and Jai-Ho appeared in her memories. The lady remembered the moment when her ex-husband told her about his country. Then, the Lord shared that in his world, women and men could receive the same education. And after that, everyone could use the knowledge to start their own business. Then, the girl told Jai-Ho that she also wanted to live like that. And the Lord, in turn, called the lady smart and regretted that she had lived her whole life in the shadow of her father. The man wanted his wife to have the opportunity to reveal all her talents. Jai-Ho often told Nadia interesting things, and thanks to him, she learned to think more broadly. But despite this, the Lord abandoned the main character to rise to a higher place. Suddenly, the lady was distracted by the merchants, telling her that she had better watch out for Shylock. After all, that man is very cunning and greedy, so he will never give up so easily. Nadia said not to worry about that, and then added that what her father hates most in the world are those who do not pay taxes on time. In fact, at that moment, the Duke ordered a tax audit against the northern merchants. Bayasit was not happy about letting his daughter use the dowry for her business. After all, my father could not imagine that Nadia would be so successful in her business. It seemed to the man that something was wrong, because such luck for the girl could not be a common accident. And current, however, according to the Duke, the lady did not come up with such a plan, so she was still lucky. But Bayasit was sure that it would not be like this forever. And soon the Winterfell family budget would be in the red again. Meanwhile, in Nadia's castle, there are no more places that need to be repaired. And all this thanks to the protagonist's business, because this money solved the problem not only of the debt, but also of the repairs. The girl was happy that her and her husband's mansion had become brighter. After examining the house, the Marquise decided to go to her office. The protagonist walked with a joyful heart, because she had overcome a difficult task. And then, the lady remembered that she had something for her butler. It turned out that Nadia gave Gordon money, saying it was a reward. However, the butler considered it too much money for him. But the girl believed that these lands existed only thanks to the hard work of the servants. And now Gordon can pay everyone the wages that were previously delayed. The man felt so flattered by his lover's kindness that he almost cried. Due to lack of money and debts, the butler really had many problems. But now everything can be solved. Gordon considered Nadia a miracle sent by the family ancestors, because she really saved everyone. The protagonist didn't even imagine that the butler would be so grateful to her. The lady was happy that, thanks to the success of her business, the servants began to trust her. The girl understood that she must continue in the same spirit for the plan to be completed. And then, through the window, Nadia saw a guy carrying a red flag and asked what it meant. It turned out to be the speaker. And since the flag is red, it means the message is urgent. The Marquise wondered why Fabian was so calm, because he should be wondering what happened. The guard suggested that Count Altio had probably crossed the border. The county of Altio is south of Winterfell, and is part of neither the Northern Commonwealth nor the Count's alliance. So it is a third power. The girl knew that relations between neighboring territories could be bad. But judging by the reaction of the servants, they were clearly hiding something from Nadia. Then, the main character suggested that the county did this every year. Looking at the men's faces, it was clear that the Marquise had hit the nail on the head. Winterfell has no money or resources, and the neighbors are also crazy. Nadia was very upset by this information, because it became even more difficult to solve all the problems of her new family. Then, the protagonist went to her husband to ask for detailed information about the attack. Glenn said that the girl had nothing to worry about, and then added that he would return soon. To this, the lady replied that she would be worried, because her beloved was going to the battlefield. The Marquis understood that this was Nadia's normal reaction to the fact that her husband was going to war. And then, Fabian intervened in the conversation, and told his lover that she really had no reason to worry. The guard believed that Winterfell's army was the best in the kingdom, and the master was the strongest warrior in the entire army. So the low-ranking soldiers of Altio would lose. Seeing Fabian's confidence, the main character began to worry less. Then, Nadia decided it was time to think about which territories to snatch from their enemies. And then the girl was surprised, because Winterfell always wins, but at the same time, they only possess the northern territory. The main character confirmed once again, with the guard, that clashes with Altio happen often. It turns out that Winterfell had many chances to seize the lands of their enemies, so it was strange that they didn't. It was here that Fabian didn't know at all what to answer his lover, because the question took him by surprise. Therefore, Glenn himself replied, explaining everything by saying that they do not seize territories due to strength. The Marquis' army wins on the battlefield, but as soon as Altio feels threatened, they hide in the fortress of Belong. This fortress is called Heaven's Gift because Winterfell can do nothing when their enemies hide there. And then, Nadia remembered that this fortress was located next to a rich source of iron ore, so there was a way to capture it. If the girl's plan succeeds, then her family will be able to keep the ore source. Moreover, the dragon Rio will soon be near the fortress of Belong. In the past, the appearance of a dragon was a disaster for all of humanity. But this time, everything will be different, because there is a whole warehouse of treasures there, and the owner is already dead. Nadia realized that she couldn't just watch what was happening, so she wouldn't stand idly by. The hero's conversation was interrupted by a man who told the Lord that it was time to leave. Then, the young man promised his wife that he would return soon. Glenn seemed to the girl an unusual man, because he spoke as if he were going to have fun, and not to war. The main character asked the Marquis to be careful and return soon. The man noticed that Glenn's relationship with his wife was not so bad. After this, they told the Marquis of Winterfell not to trust Nadia. It was clear that it was easy to believe a beautiful and fragile girl who said pleasant words. But it is better not to believe the lady and not to give her your heart, because she can deceive you. Glenn understood all this. However, his wife had paid off all his debts, so he couldn't be rude to her. In fact, the Marquis did not trust the main character, but was simply grateful to her. A couple of days later, the action takes place in the Winterfell camp. As expected, Altio locked himself in the fortress to withdraw the army. However, the young man doubted it, because then the enemies would attack them again. Therefore, he offered the knight to try to take the fortress before their opponent's forces recovered. Glenn also did not want to let Altio go so easily, as always, because that leads to nothing. However, the Marquis did not want to risk the lives of the soldiers, because the probability of failure was high. And then the men were interrupted by a noise that suddenly began to come from the street. Then, Glenn wanted to check why there was so much noise outside, and at the same time get some air. As the young man started to go out into the street, he bumped into a man. It turned out that the Marquise herself arrived at the Winterfell camp, despite the guards trying to stop her. The hero was very surprised that his wife was unexpectedly in such a place. The girl, taking off her hood, calmly told Glenn that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. After that, the protagonist said with a smile that she missed her husband. Then the Marquis assumed that no one had come because she was worried about him. And then he himself began to deny his thoughts. As a result, the young man told the girl that it would be better if they went inside first. As soon as the couple entered the tent, the lady admitted that she had written a military application. The main character told her husband that she had found a way to capture the Belong fortress. Then, Glenn became convinced that Nadia had not come because she was worried about him. The man asked his wife if she knew what a military application meant in wartime. The lady said that the penalty for filing a false report was the death penalty. The Marquise knew about the punishment, but she only told the truth, so she had nothing to worry about. Observing the main character's confidence, it seemed that her method would bring them victory. Then Lord Giscard wanted to see how good Nadia's plan was. Then Nadia decided to start telling all the details of her idea. The girl said that it is necessary to build a mountain in the west and dig a cave in the north. The mountain in the plan will simply be a trap, so it is not necessary to build it to the end. But the cave was the most important, and underground you need to place a lot of gunpowder and oil and then set fire to everything. When the cave collapses, the fortress will fall with it, and then it will be possible to capture the enemies. Glenn admitted that they hadn't even thought of that, but there are many granite rocks in the area. It is also fashionable not to worry about this, because no one saw information in his father's office that there are many soft rocks in the north of the fortress. The Marquis understood that the problem with the Balong fortress had dragged on, so it was impossible to retreat any longer. However, Giscard did not want to trust the main character, because she is from the Bayasit family. Winterfell then stopped the Lord, implying that he should stop saying unpleasant things about Nadia. After all, everyone was tired of the problem with the fortress, and now there was a chance to end it all. If the main character still told the truth, then this is a chance to win. The Lord ordered people to be sent north to check if there were really many soft rocks there. If a woman is willing to Chalkrel risk her life, most likely she is not deceiving him. The girl was happy that her husband trusted her in such an important matter. This joy of Nadia greatly confused Glenn because he didn't mean it seriously. After this, the protagonist again asked the Marquis to take care of himself. After some time, the men finally put the plan into practice and were already monitoring the result. And it turned out that the girl had not lied, and the fortress began to collapse so that the assault could begin. Everything went well, and Winterfell was already behind the fortress, where their enemy was talking about surrendering. The man demanded that Glenn follow aristocratic laws, because his captive is a nobleman. But the Marquis's enemy himself did not follow any laws, so it was strange to hear this from him. After all, less than 6 months had passed since the army of Winterfell returned from the expedition to Calia, where everyone sacrificed themselves for the good of the kingdom. However, Altio was not even allowed to rest as a soldier, but immediately declared a new war. The prisoner still tried to convince Glenn that, in any case, it was impossible to kill the nobleman. And then a third person joined the dialogue, who said that Count Altio was speaking correctly. It was Nadia who told her husband that he really could not take the life of a prisoner. And then the main character decided to offer the men another option. The lady said that, if he lost and was captured, Count Altio might commit suicide out of shame. Glenn's enemy then decided that the girl who had come was simply crazy. Then the Count began to ask with much more insistence that they forgive him, and even promised to renounce all his wealth. After this, the prisoner was offered a non-aggression pact that he had to sign. The document stated that, firstly, Altio would not attack Winterfell for 30 years. Secondly, the county, as the losing party, will pay 100,000 gold. Thirdly, Altio would surrender all rights to the Rhine lands, including the fortress of Belong, and the Count had no right to argue these points. The couple asked the loser why he was sitting, because it would be better for him to sign the contract quickly. After the victory over Altio, the soldiers rushed to celebrate, because it was truly a joyful event. Everyone was happy, because they had finally overcome the prolonged war. People were amazed by the plan the lady came up with, because no one could have thought that it would be possible to find a loophole in the mountainous area. And while everyone was having fun, Lord Giscard sat silently, as if thinking about something. The Marquis himself thought about it, because his wife first helped with the debts, then with the victory, which was surprising. At first, Glenn thought that Nadia was only approaching him to spy. But in the end, everything turned out to be completely different. And then Winterfell noticed that his wife was not with them. Then, Fabian told the man that the lady was absent because she was very tired. But the girl didn't rest, but thought about how to quietly hint to the Marquis about the dragon's whereabouts. No one thought of saying that an ancestor approached her in a dream and told her all the information. Then, the main character decided that it sounded quite impressive, and then the Marquise heard a noise, which surprised her very much, because she had told everyone she was resting. Unexpectedly, the lady saw her husband at the door, who had approached her. The girl thought Glenn was celebrating with everyone, so she asked what brought him here. Then, the Marquis remembered that it was only thanks to no one that his troops were able to win. So it was better for her to go to the soldiers. After this, the young man held out his hand to his wife to accompany her. The girl happily extended her hand, thinking she was in big trouble. Glenn admitted to his wife that Fabian told him that he wanted to rest in his room. But at the same time, the protagonist did not sleep, although she told everyone about her fatigue. Then Nadia replied that she couldn't sleep thinking about new territories. The girl said she had to figure out how to use the received land, especially the mine. And while the lady was talking about iron ore production, she accidentally stumbled. But fortunately, the protagonist did not fall, because her husband caught her in time. The lady explained everything, saying that she was simply too relaxed because she had stopped worrying about Glenn. And then the Marquise noticed that Winterfell's face was as close as possible to hers. The girl told her husband that he could let her go, and he, in turn, asked her to be careful. First, the young man offered to accompany Nadia, and now he was so close, and all this greatly confused the lady. Moreover, it became obvious that the atmosphere in the Winterfell couple had somehow changed. When the couple approached the soldiers, they continued to have fun, but as soon as everyone noticed that the lady had arrived, they directed all their attention to her. All the warriors were drunk, which the main character did not like very much. Then the Marquis explained to his wife that everyone was very happy about the end of the war. And then Lord Giscard approached Nadia, who admitted that he wanted to tell the girl something. This came just in time for the main character, because she wanted to point something out. After this, the man knelt down and apologized to the lady for doubting her. The Marquise did not expect such a turn of events, because it was clear that the Lord did not trust the Duke's daughter. The girl asked the Lord to stand up, because she perfectly understands why it is hard for him to trust. But then Nadia added that she was the Marquis's wife, and that misbehavior towards her was equivalent to damaging Winterfell's reputation. Then Glenn defended Giscard, saying that he behaved this way out of loyalty and that this would not happen again. However, the lady did not want to assert her authority at the expense of others. so she decided to inflict a worthy punishment on the Lord herself. The man did not resist this, because he understood how rude he had been to his lover. Nadia pointed out that it would be difficult for Giscard to endure the punishment alone. Therefore, the Marquise decided to divide the punishment so that it would not be such a heavy burden. And when everyone got scared, the girl said that every single soldier would be punished. So everyone, without exception, had to drink a penalty. Only then did everyone realize that the lady was just joking with them. After this, the main character asked the maid to bring her what she asked for. It was then that the soldiers noticed that they were carrying too much alcohol. Moreover, they brought vodka, but Nadia argued that the penalty area should look exactly like this. The Marquise even decided to serve it personally to the commander, so he thanked her. Although everyone took this situation as a joke, the Lord understood that it was about their bad manners. Giscard supposed that the girl was not so simple, because with such a punishment, she made everyone remember that she was superior to them. And everyone else continued to have fun, lining up to get their penalty area. And while the protagonist was joking with the soldiers, her husband was just watching her. However, while no one was looking, Glenn even allowed himself to smile while looking at Nadia. After the celebration, everyone went to bed, except the lady, who was heading to the books. When the main character reached the indicated place, she began to search for something in the newspapers. The lady did what she planned, and then thought that in the Winterfell family, even the ancestors should thank her. After this, 4 days passed, and everyone went to the Belong Fortress. The girl shouted that she held a document in her hand that spoke about the dragon Rio. This greatly annoyed everyone, because they were the only ones who received the land. And here is such a disaster. Then, the Marquis understood why everything was going suspiciously well. Because due to the dragon, they would not be able to get rid of this land now. And then, no one said there was nothing to worry about, because the dragon's owner had died a long time ago. Apparently, Count Altio just received the report, and he hasn't had time to start the excavations yet. So all the rare objects accumulated by the dragon now belong to them. Glenn didn't understand why something good started to happen so often, because he had never been lucky. The girl noticed that her husband didn't believe in such luck, because he didn't know that everything was thanks to the lady. However, it was not clear how the main character read this document. After all, the men also found this report, but they couldn't read the incomprehensible handwriting. Then, the girl realized that no one was saying anything about the document, only because she wrote it with her left hand, and no one understood what was written there. Nadia started making excuses by saying that her father had similar handwriting, so she got used to it. The Marquis noticed that his wife has many different talents, which amazes him. After this, Glenn ordered Annals to quickly send a detachment to search for the dragon. As a result, everything was ready in Winterfell, and his people went to inspect the surroundings. Looking around, the young man realized that the fertile land now belonged to him. However, the Marquis did not have enough farmers, and because of this, most of the fields were idle. Count Altio himself charged high taxes to the farmers who rented land. Therefore, people began to starve, and in the end, they simply fled the county. And even if Glenn forces his farmers to move to these lands, there will still not be enough labor. So, the soldiers suggested that their master simply return the farmers who had fled the county. If the Marquis gives the order, the Lord will lead the army and search the entire surrounding area for peasants. However, if people were forced to return, it would affect the Marquis's reputation. So, Nadia suggested using itinerant farmers to solve the labor shortage. But Winterfell was not sure that people would want to settle in this place. Even if Glenn cuts taxes, they won't trust him so easily, because from their point of view, Altio is a terrible territory. So the Marquis asked if his wife had any ideas, because it seemed she had already thought of something. But the main character didn't understand why the young man himself was asking for her opinion. The girl replied that if the Marquis lent her a sword, she could solve the problem. Nadia asked for a weapon that had been passed down through generations of the Winterfell family. So, the man wondered what the lady was going to do with the heirloom. And the main character was already ready to take this sword. However, her husband did not give it to the girl. But then Glenn explained that the weapon was simply too heavy, so it would be difficult for Nadia to carry. Fabian would become the mistress's arms and legs, but she believed she wasn't that weak. So, the main character was once again convinced that something had changed in Glenn. At that moment, in the local restaurant, they were talking about the history of St. Petersburg and 10 gold ingots. This incident is already being talked about throughout the town, and there are practically no people who haven't heard about it. The story began with the fact that one day, a new owner appeared in the county of Altio, and the new boss hung an interesting sign next to the fortress gates, which said that whoever pulled out the boss's sword would receive 10 gold ingots. But the people decided that this was a test to see if the neighbors dared to touch the owner's things. However, a brave young man still appeared and decided to try to pull out the sword. That day, the one who managed to pull the sword from the head appeared, as stated on the tablet. Then the boss arrived, and people started to worry about the brave one. But instead of the expected punishment, the young man received the promised reward. Peter, who was the only one to believe the leader's promise, was greatly rewarded, and he lived happily. Therefore, people began to say that the new boss was different from Count Altio. So Belong Fortress was filled with peasants again. One of the visitors to the establishment then told the others that taxes would soon be reduced, and that they should toast to it. The peasants were happy, because thanks to the new chapter, they could soon live normally. As a result, the lady had much more to do, because everyone ran to her with questions. And the Marquis watched all this, not understanding why his wife, sparing no effort, was dealing with Winterfell's affairs. The girl says that all this is due to her love for Glenn, but at the same time, she is not interested in him at all. And then the couple was upset by the news that the diagram of Balong Fortress had finally been found. The walls of the building were very strong, and the interior of the structure looked like a labyrinth. The previous owner protected himself this way from the invasion of his territory by enemies. There were many secret places in the fortress, and one of them might contain treasures hidden by the count. But not everyone was only interested in money, since in the past, Altio sold high-quality steel objects along with the gnomes, and all these items would be of great help in the development of Winterfell, so she wanted to find them too. As a result, all the secret rooms were found, but no traces of gnomes were found. Suddenly, Glenn stopped, and because of this, his wife bumped into him. Looking at the wall, the young man said it looked strange. The path was blocked, but there was a gap and the wall was slightly deteriorated. So, Winterfell tried to push the wall, hoping to find something behind it. And the Marquis was right, because he found the door to another secret room. This place wasn't even on the map, so it was surprising that Glenn found it. The heroes started down the stairs, and on the walls of the room, the heroine noticed traces that looked like blood. This is how people were able to find the blacksmith, whom the count, for unknown reasons, hid in that place. The lady noticed a large number of items, and they were all of high quality. Nadia was attracted to a dagger, which she immediately took, surprised that it was handmade. But her husband immediately took the weapon from the girl, saying it might be poisoned. So it was better not to touch anything here. Glenn didn't know that all Altio items were of such high quality. And then, the guard heard strange sounds coming from very close by. They were like the prayers of half-dead people, and they sounded from under the door. So, the young man decided to check what was there, and asked the boy to look after the lady. When Glenn entered the room behind the door, he saw another room behind the bars. It turned out that there were dwarves in this dungeon who asked to be forgiven. It was unclear what was happening and why all the creatures were chained. So the Marquis asked the dwarves what was going on here, because he himself didn't know. It turned out that the gnomes thought the count had sent people, which is why they were so scared. It became clear that Altio exploited not only people, but also gnomes. After this, Winterfell entered the dungeon and said that he would personally take care of everything. The young man drew a sword and attacked one of the gnomes. And then his wife ran to him and asked him to stop. The main character began to say that the unfortunate prisoners should not be killed. After all, the gnomes are just victims of the count who used them. However, the Marquis did not want to kill the dwarves, but only to break the chains that bound them. After this, the man introduced himself and said that he was the new boss of the county. Glenn was very interested in what Altio was doing with the poor gnomes. So, one of the prisoners shared that the gnomes themselves did not expect things to turn out this way. It turned out that the creatures only wanted to see the human world, but everyone was afraid of them and called them monsters. The dwarves, led by Lord Meyer, went through all the houses, but they were not welcome, so they decided to go to another village. Moreover, they had a sick baby with them, but they were too busy fleeing from people. No one wanted to help the strange creatures, so they no longer knew what to do. And then Meyer decided to go to the fortress to ask the boss for help. The gnomes only asked to be sheltered for a short time until the child's fever subsided. But the count only thought that those who came to him looked disgusting. Therefore, Altio ordered that the hands of whoever let the gnomes in be cut off, and that they themselves be expelled. But the creatures continued to ask for help, saying they were willing to do anything for it. And while the dwarf resisted the guards, a bowl fell from under his clothes. Seeing the beautiful object, the boss still ordered the creatures to be abandoned. The count decided that those who had come had simply stolen it because they looked poor. And then the gnomes said that they themselves had made this bowl, which interested Altio. The unfortunate ones came for help, and the count locked them in the basement, explaining that this way he would protect them from possible threats. However, when the gnomes wanted to leave, Altio did not let them in, saying they owed him their help. The boss said he was obliged to protect the local residents, so he would not release such monsters into the village. So, the prisoners realized that the count had not planned to let them go from the beginning. Dicky decided to attack Altio because he did not give the guests food or time to rest. Only the dwarf was unsuccessful, and the count calmly repelled his attack. And after that, the imprisoned and hungry prisoners were found by a couple along with a guard. Glenn replied that it would have been much better if the unfortunate ones had been found much earlier. The young man promised that he would compensate the gnomes for everything they had experienced and provide them with treatment. Mia replied that treatment alone would be enough for them, and then they would return to their place. And then Nadia said it would be a shame if the gnomes returned so easily. The girl invited those who came to see the world they so wanted to explore. But the dwarves feared that no one would ever be happy with them again, and that they would be forced to work again. Then, the main character promised that no one would ever kidnap or lock up the guests again. Moreover, the lady did not force anyone, and if someone did not want to, they could simply refuse. But the girl would be happy if the gnomes stayed, because their lands need such talented artisans. And Nadia thought that her past self also wanted that comfort. The young man agreed with his wife's words, saying that he thought the same. The Marquis, as the new boss, guaranteed the dwarves freedom and security. So, the dwarves decided to agree to cooperate with the new owner of the county. After some time, Fabian reported to the couple that the inspection of the iron ammunition was complete, and that everything was of good quality. Now it was clear that iron armor is much stronger than normal armor. If Glenn can distribute that armor, the army's defense will multiply by 100. In the end, everything turned out perfectly according to the main character's plan, which was very pleasing. Winterfell now had money from the dragon and the thorny vine. Moreover, the family now owned territory and food in the Rhine region, and the army was fully equipped with iron armor and weapons. Thanks to all this, the North will soon be able to compare with the South, which will help defeat Winterfell in their next war. This means that the Bayasit family will soon be defeated, so they will face the sad last moments of their lives. After some time, Fabian approached the lady and brought her the products she was talking about. After this, Fabian asked why the main character needed this, since she herself would not use it. So, Nadia explained to him that it was for a gift, and she herself thought it was the first time she had prepared a gift for someone. And then, the girl remembered the day she was given something, because it was an isolated incident. It was the day Karen was angry with her stepsister, as usual, and it was all because Nadia's dress attracted more attention than the girl's outfit. Karen was ready to hit the main character, but Jaiho stopped her. After that, the Lord took the lady's hand, telling her he needed her. Then Nadia was very surprised by the man's words and actions. That time, Karen couldn't vent her anger on her sister because she was saved. And then the Lord gave Nadia a new dress and invited her to dinner, although this was unusual for them. At that meeting, the girl noticed that her husband didn't know how to handle cutlery at all, and she asked him about it. Jaiho said that at home he ate as it suited him, because no one was watching him, and then the main character invited the boy to teach him table etiquette. After dinner, the Lord asked his wife if she felt discriminated against. After all, Jaiho was ignored only because he was an outsider, so he wondered if the illegitimate daughter faced the same thing. Then, no one noticed that it was very difficult for her husband, because he was alone in this world. And the Lord supposed that it was not easy for the protagonist either, because she was the daughter of a concubine. After this, the couple looked at the stars, and the man talked about how much one could learn from them. And no matter how pleasant these memories were, in the end it was Jaiho who betrayed Nadia. The main character trusted her ex-husband, and he hurt her. When the Duke found out that Winterfell had taken the fortress from Tio, he became furious, but the man didn't understand how the Marquis could find out the exact location of the soft rocks. The Duke pointed out that Winterfell has had constant good luck since Nadia married him. After this, the man asked if he had any news of his daughter, to which he was told no. But it was a pleasure that Lord Jaiho was successful in the Gadavir military campaign. But the Duke still had a bad feeling about his daughter. The Marquis, meanwhile, passed through the village of Tapu, which was on the outskirts of Winterfell. Very poor people lived in this place, who for the first time saw such an amount of food that the spouses were carrying. After this, the lady got out of her carriage and offered the child one of the apples she had. Meanwhile, Glenn offered to relax a little in this village. The Marquis was happy, because just a couple of months ago it was impossible to see a smile on the faces of the neighbors. But now the situation has changed. Then the protagonist told her husband that time passes quickly, because they are already returning to their mansion. The girl began to say something about the return ceremony to Winterfell and about the Marquis's place in the procession. But the man barely listened to his wife, because he was thinking about how beautiful she was. When he came to his senses, the Marquis said that the girl would enter the territory with him, but that he didn't want to be seen. Nadia didn't want to attract attention so that her father wouldn't start suspecting her and call her a double agent. To this, Glenn replied that he did not want to involve the lady in his relationship with the duchy. Then the main character said that in the near future, a war could begin between the North and the South, and in this case, Nadia promised that she would choose Winterfell between the two sides. And the Marquise will do this because she loves her husband very much, which is why she is willing to take his side. Because of these words, the young man felt very embarrassed and even blushed slightly. After that, Glenn said it was time to leave, so Nadia should get into the carriage. Meanwhile, Aunt Marquise asked the butler to give her the girl's seal. However, Gordon had no right to treat his mistress's things with such negligence. But the old woman knew that Nadia had left her home, so someone else had to take care of the family home. The woman began to say that the main character simply ran away when the opportunity arose. But the butler knew that his mistress was currently next to her husband, and after a while, Glenn himself returned home, which made everyone very happy. The newcomers were immediately greeted by Aunt Marquise to ask Nadia what she had done in the war. And then the protagonist admitted that she missed her husband so much that she couldn't stand it anymore. The old woman noticed that Nadia's presence on the battlefield could only hinder Glenn. And then Giscard joined the dialogue, saying that Madame Grace needed to watch her words. The rest of the soldiers agreed with the Lord's words, saying that Nadia did not interfere with them. Grace decided that everyone was crazy if they were protecting Valisid's daughter. After that, Glenn said that he and his wife were tired, so they would go to rest. The woman realized that she could not allow Nadia to take all the power. After the hostess returned, the maid Risa offered to heat water for the bath, and the Marquise, in turn, called the girl to her house. It turned out that Nadia had prepared gifts for 3 maids named Risa, Yuri, and Aiden. The girls were happy that their work was noticed, so they walked around talking about how good their mistress was. And then, the maids began to worry that the master was not interested in Nadia at all. So, the heroines decided to come up with a plan to bring the married couple closer. The tired lady, meanwhile, went to the bathroom to rest well, and then the lady heard a noise, as if someone was approaching her. Suddenly, Nadia realized that the noise was not coming from the servants, but from her husband. Both spouses did not understand what happened and how they bumped into each other here. So, the lady supposed that the servants were just playing a prank on them, and she herself thought that Glenn looked very embarrassed. As a result, the heroes decided that Nadia would leave soon and Glenn would follow her. But then, the man began to worry because he seemed so insensitive that the servants had to resort to this. Therefore, the Marquis decided not to leave, but to stay with his wife. The young man understood that if he left now, rumors would spread that he had rejected Nadia again. And then the protagonist noticed the scar, so she asked the Marquis where it was from. But the man only asked the girl to keep her distance. But in the end, a dialogue began between the spouses, and they discussed many things. The next day, the maids whispered that their master stayed in the bathroom until dawn. After this, the Marquis invited his wife to inspect the territories together. There was a festival at that time, so there were many people around the couple. And then, the heroine noticed a man running towards them, shouting that he would punish the brat Bayasit. Fortunately, the Marquis was able to react quickly, stopping the stranger. It turned out that the attacker's brother had died, and he believed that the Bayasit family, including Nadia, was to blame. And then, the stranger's mother ran out of the crowd and asked the master to have mercy on them. Then Winterfell let the guy go, because it turned out he knew his dead brother Clark, who died as a hero. Nadia said it was okay, so the Marquis let the young man get away with it. That night, the lady returned to work, and the guard asked the girl to go to bed. Then, the main character asked the boys to go rest, and she decided to work a little longer. The Lord had already completely forgotten that his wife was the daughter of a doctor, but a recent incident reminded him of it. That's why the young man arrived early for training to distract himself from his thoughts. The soldiers, seeing that their master was not in a good mood, decided that he still did not accept Nadia's feelings. The young men began to say that the mistress is the ideal wife, so they cannot reject her for so long. However, Glenn was worried that if he fell in love with the Duke's daughter, he would betray his parents. And then Fabian approached the man, who told him that no one was inviting the Marquis to lunch together. During dinner, the protagonist noticed that her husband's attitude towards her had changed. The girl wanted to talk about it, but then Glenn shouted at her, ordering her to be quiet. After this, the young man immediately began to apologize, saying that he did not want to get angry. Then the Marquis asked that when the man was ready to talk, he would let her know. Glenn was overwhelmed by doubts, because he liked the daughter of the man who killed his mother. This happened when the cart with the man's parents fell off a mountain ridge. And as a result, the mother died, and the father still suffers from poisoning due to a serious injury. And the culprit of this terrible catastrophe was Nadia's father, Duke Bayasit. However, in a past life, Nadia heard from her father that the tragedy was not his fault. In fact, the culprit was among his own, because it was someone who could quietly approach the Marquis. The main character understood that she had to find the real criminal, so that her father would not be blamed for this. And then a maid approached the lady and brought her a letter that had arrived from the Duchy of Bayasit. The letter contained an encrypted message that no one needed to transmit information. Aunt Glenn received information that the man had lost interest in his wife, and the old woman was very happy about this. The woman decided that Nadia should not last even a year in this house, because Grace had her own people everywhere. While Glenn tried to distract himself with training, his wife understood that they needed to fix things between them. And then, the main character decided to ask her husband to teach her archery. At the girl's request, the young man began to teach her proper shooting techniques. At night, while no one was watching, one of the maids went into the forest. There the girl began to address something, annoyed that it was too dark. And then one of the guards found Heidi and asked her what she was doing here. However, Jacob supposed that the maid was secretly working part-time, so he wanted to tell everyone about it. They reported this incident to Grace and told her everything as it happened. The girl explained that she simply didn't have enough money to buy expensive medicine for a loved one. So, the woman gave Heidi a large sum, telling her that Nadia couldn't take care of her servants. After some time, the old woman approached the girl, and at that moment, she was writing a letter to her father. Grace told the main character that she had come to apologize, which surprised Nadia. After the reconciliation, the old woman advised the lady to go to Glenn's father, because he didn't have much time left. The girl replied that she would definitely go, and then asked Heidi to accompany Grace, who was already preparing to leave. After that, Reese's maid approached the mistress and told her that Nadia should be careful with Grace. And then the main character noticed that Heidi was talking to the old woman, which seemed strange to her. As a result, Nadia still dared and went with Isaac along with the butler. Gordon told the man that his son had gotten married, and then offered to see how beautiful his wife was. So, the girl introduced herself and said that she was the eldest daughter of the Duke of Bayasit. After meeting Glenn's father, Nadia confronted the Marquis himself, and the girl decided to ask her husband so that they could now go to Isaac together. The young man agreed and then went to visit his father as well. At night, the lady sat too long with the documents, and the maids asked her to rest. And then, one of the girls asked Nadia if she knew the legend about the 1,000-year-old tree. Near the north gate of the castle, a large tree grows that blooms in spring for only one day, and only at night. There is a legend that says that if you pray to this tree for love, you can make anyone fall in love with you. The girls were very eager to look at this tree, so they asked the lady to accompany them. Then, the main character agreed to go with them to the north gate, 3 days after the full moon, to contemplate the blooming. When one of the maids woke up the next day, Heidi was already standing, which was too early for her. The girl began to say that she just wanted to go to the dining room first, but suddenly her bag with the money fell. After that, Adi ran away without explaining anything to the other girl. After some time, Risa went to the dining room, but she didn't find the girl who had run away there. But Nadia kept her promise and went with the servants to the tree. The girls were right, because the blooming tree looked great. And then the main character asked Glenn to find his love. As a result, the lady was cold, so one of the maids offered to accompany her back. However, for some reason, Heidi guided the Marquise from the south, although it is faster to get there from the north. But then, the internal guards stopped the girl, and Captain Tristan asked her where she was going. The protagonist boldly replied that she was going to her room, so it was unclear why they stopped her. However, Grace appeared and said that no one was trying to escape from the castle. And then, the woman took out a letter that the girl had sent to her father. When Grace brought a candle to the newspaper, a text appeared that said Nadia had fulfilled her duty, and she would leave during the full moon. But the Marquise never wrote such a thing, which means someone is trying to set her up. And then the girl noticed that everyone, including Glenn and Giscard, had gathered in that place. There was also a doctor there, who said that Isaac had suddenly developed a fever for an unknown reason. Grace began to tell Glenn that his wife was trying to hurt his father, so she needed to be captured immediately. But the Marquis first wanted to hear the main character's version, and then blame her. And then Nadia reminded her husband that she wrote the letter in his presence, and that she didn't do anything strange afterwards. This means that someone forged the recording to defame the Marquis's wife. Then Glenn asked his aunt why she did this to Nadia. And after that, Winterfell asked Grace if she was the culprit of his parents' accident. And no matter how much the old woman made excuses, Glenn no longer wanted to listen to her, but demanded that she be arrested. Hoping to avoid punishment, Grace pointed to the maid and said that it was Heidi who brought her the letter. It turned out that the maid was initially colluding with Nadia, and the old woman only fell into a trap. The main character realized long ago that Grace was the culprit of the accident, and even discussed it with Glenn. The couple decided to test the old woman to make sure she was guilty, and devised a plan. The Marquis said that Grace would be taken to court for being accused of harming the Marquis, and that she would definitely be expelled from Winterfell. After this, the protagonist was about to leave, but then her husband hugged her tightly. The man was glad that his wife was not the daughter of the one who killed his parents, but Glenn ordered the real murderer and all his assistants to be executed, and that the Greenwood properties be confiscated. It became known that the painting that Grace gave to Isaac was covered with poison. After some time, the team investigating the lair of the dragon Rio returned to the mansion, and then Nadia ordered the merchants to sell the jewels that the team had brought. However, in the lair, not only treasures were found, but also a large egg, which was probably a dragon egg. Glenn decided to entrust this egg to Nadia, because thanks to her, the lair was found. The maids were already waiting for the little dragon, but the owner told them that too much time had passed, and that most likely it would not live to this day. And then Gordon brought the news that Li Jai-ho had killed a poisonous dragon in the south of the country. The man began to worry that because of this, the influence of the south could increase. Li Jai-ho himself, meanwhile, went to the Duke, who happily greeted the dragon hunter. After this, the man said that he had someone he wanted to introduce to the Lord. The Duke invited his nephew Aiden, who graduated from the academy this year. Jai-ho realized that this young man would probably become the next Duke, so it was necessary to find common ground with him. After this, the Duke told the Lord that he could try to ask the king to be knighted. Bayezid told the hero that he can now get what he wants. However, Jai-ho thought that he had already been deprived of what he wanted. Nadia, meanwhile, watched the egg until her husband distracted her. And then, a maid ran to the couple and told them that Glenn's father had woken up. So Isaac found out that while he was unconscious, his son managed to marry Bayezid's daughter. Isaac had already been told everything that no one had done for Winterfell, and that all this was only for the love of his son. And then Glenn began to tell his father that the girl was definitely not a spy. However, the man already knew that. Otherwise, his son would have already caught the lady in a lie. Looking at the finances, Isaac was surprised at how well everything was going. Then the old Winterfell said that he only had to wait for the heir, and he could die in peace. At night, the girl couldn't sleep, because due to her feelings for Glenn, the whole plan would fall apart, because she planned to escape later, but feared she wouldn't have the courage anymore. And then, the protagonist's thoughts were interrupted by her husband, who asked if he could come in. Glenn apologized to Nadia for previously calling her a spy for the Bayasit family. After this, the boy began to approach his wife, eager to kiss her. But the lady stopped her husband. thinking that she needed to confess to him that Nadia had only married him to escape her father's clutches. And then the couple went out to the garden to talk honestly with each other. The girl hadn't said anything yet, but Glenn had already guessed that she didn't marry him for love. But even if all this were a lie, the main character is still important to the Marquis. And then Nadia admitted that she actually hated her family. The lady also said that when the Bayasit family falls, she will quietly leave Winterfell. The young man was hurt by the fact that the girl was going to leave him in the future by filing for divorce. The man noticed how serious everything was, as everyone considered her a woman blinded by love. But in fact, all this time, Nadia desperately wanted revenge on everyone who offended her. Therefore, the Marquis did not blame his wife, because the girl simply wanted to be saved. So, the heroes agreed that they would now have a profitable partnership and would no longer have to pretend. However, not everything was so simple, so the man trained again to think about it. And the young man got so carried away that he didn't notice how his hand began to bleed. Glenn blamed himself for not asking Nadia to stay with him. The Marquis realized that all this time, it wasn't his wife who was in love with him, but him with her. Fabian supposed that something was happening with the knight, as well as with the lady, which meant they had some problems in their relationship. And then, the maid informed the young man that his father had told Glenn to go to his mistress's chambers. Nadia also received information that Isaac insists on having an heir. Therefore, the Marquis approached his wife, and then, in turn, told her that today she would sleep on the sofa. But Winterfell did not let the main character leave, grabbing her hand tightly. Glenn did not want his wife to sleep on the sofa, so they decided to lie together in bed. Then a conversation began between the heroes, and the man promised that he would protect Nadia at any cost. The next day the weather was good, so the main character went for a walk. And so, the lady and the maids arrived at the place where the men were training. And Glenn, seeing his wife, approached her to offer to practice shooting together. And then the man took the heroine to the forest so she could practice archery there. The girl didn't even know it, but all this was the knight's plan, in which Glenn had to show his best side to please Nadia. After this, the young man gave the lady a bow that he had made himself. And then the girl began to suspect something, and then she saw the tops of the knights' heads. The protagonist realized that all this was arranged to surprise her. All this made Nadia laugh so much that she couldn't help but laugh, and then she called her husband cute. But then it started to rain, and the lady asked if this was also planned, which revealed that she had revealed the plan. After that, Glenn said that there was an abandoned house nearby, and they could wait there. When the couple entered the house, the man gave Nadia his cloak to keep warm. Because the rain was too heavy, the knight lost sight of the couple. As a result, the heroes were found, but the men decided to leave them alone, and not to bother them. After some time, the couple discussed that there should be a good harvest this year. And then, the news reached the master that a wave of monsters was approaching. In the next campaign, they decided to use new armor, and only the route remained to be decided. After this, Nadia asked if she could go with her husband, and although everyone was against it, the Marquis supported his wife's wish. With the monster wave, monsters enter the human world through a new gate. The cause of the disaster is unknown, so it cannot be prevented, so all that remains is to react quickly. As a result, Glenn and his army were able to defeat all the monsters, although there were many of them. After this, Nadia said she wanted to make a special product from the monster byproducts. The girl said that the byproducts could be used as medicine. After all, the lady had seen demons using their own race as food, and medicine in a future war against humans. So Nadia decided to approach the jellyfish, but then one of the snakes attacked the heroine. Fortunately, Glenn managed to save his wife, but he himself was injured. After the examination, the doctor reported that the wound was extensive, but the man would recover. However, although everything turned out well, the young man had a high fever, so no one rushed to him. The protagonist decided to sit with her husband and apply compresses to make him feel better. And when the young man fell asleep, the lady kissed him in gratitude for saving him. After destroying the monster wave, the Winterfell defense team returned. At the request of the main character, the spin-offs were fully loaded. Nadia immediately got to work, and Wayne informed her that most of the jewels from the Dragon Cave had been sold for a lot of money. After this, the girl told the merchant that she would soon need to sell the monster byproducts. After this, Wayne remembered that he had a gift for his mistress, which was silk made from threads woven by the fairies of the Golden Forest. So, Nadia decided to sew herself a silk dress, because she would soon receive an invitation from the royal family. Because His Majesty's birthday was just around the corner, the main character understood that at this holiday she would have to meet her family. After this, the girl decided to get to work, but then she noticed that cracks had appeared in the egg. When Glenn entered his wife's room, he found an unusual sight. It turned out that a small dragon was born from the egg, something no one expected. Although the young man was afraid that something might happen to Nadia, everything was fine. However, the dragon only treated the girl well because it considered her its mother. So, the main character hurried to scold the creature for not biting people. As a result, Nadia decided to name the dragon Noah and asked her husband's opinion on this matter. After some time, as expected, Winterfell received an invitation from the royal family. Then, the heroes discussed a plan to sell drugs from monster byproducts. And Glenn told his wife that she shouldn't overdo it, because she is always busy with business. The Lord, who thought he wanted to meet someone as soon as possible, also received an invitation letter.